Okay, guys, so now to repeat myself, welcome to The Edge. This is the latest webinar in our series of many webinars, but this is one of the most important because we've got Dave Lee with us, who's a hormone expert, and we're going to really be talking about hormone optimization, which is something that myself and Tusk really been banging the drum for throughout this course, because we feel it's really super important in terms of just, you know, the process of self-actualization, and to be quite frank, actually getting more girls as well, because if you don't have this side of things sorted out, then it's likely that you're not going to have the drive and the, you know, the gonads basically to go in there and really make things happen in the current dating marketplace. But anyway, with all of that said, if we hand over to Dave. So Dave, did you want to sort of introduce yourself, tell the guys a bit about you, and then obviously get into the meat of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Troy. So a bit of a background about me, and then I'll kind of spiel about what I'll be talking about, and then we'll actually get into the meat and potatoes of it. So I'm a health coach from Australia. I currently live in Eastern Europe for a number of reasons. And I am particularly interested in men's hormone optimization therapy, but also the psychology and the philosophy that comes with masculinity. And I think that there's a very interesting cross-section between my area and, you know, Troy and Tusk's area around intersexual dynamics, behavioral psychology, but how that impacts both how people react to you and how you react to yourself in the world when your hormones and health are optimal versus when your physical health and hormones are suboptimal. And I think that this has, cool, videos worked. Okay, and I think that this is something that a lot of people are experiencing a lot of pain and suffering from in real time without knowing what it is. I think a lot of guys are going to doctors. I think a lot of guys are going to psychologists, counselors, everything in between with hypogonadism, which is the medical term for low testosterone, and the outcomes from that. And they're being diagnosed with depression, anxiety, inattentive ADHD, clinical fucking whatever they're putting the label on it. And in reality, a lot of these outcomes can manifest from the low testosterone state. They can be symptoms and disorders that manifest from this. But at core, the foundation of what is going on with a lot of guys, and also younger guys, not just older guys, is endocrine disruption and low testosterone. So I was originally interested in neuropsychiatry. I actually dropped out of a master's in neuropsychiatry. I wanted to learn how to heal the brain and fix mental health. And I ended up transitioning into hormone therapy because that was the solution to the problem that I was trying to solve. So I've been on TRT now for coming up to 7 years. I had a brain injury when I was 25 that I used TRT to recover from. And then I also found Troy's content back in, I think, the end of 2020, when I went through a particularly messy engagement split in Australia and learned about, how will we call it, the intersexual dynamics and behavioral psychology when that goes south, and also how to, I guess, meld the physiological effects of testosterone and then the psychological understanding of masculinity together. So do you want me to just get into it? Any other questions you want me to rattle off? Okay,
we'll jump in with the questions as they come up, I think.
Yeah, cool. So just stop me if at any point you want me to go over anything, or if anyone wants to put their hand up, however you guys want to do this, we can run it that way. So when we're looking at firstly at what testosterone is, so testosterone is a hormone, and a lot of the time we talk about DHT as well, which I like to call super testosterone, dihydrotestosterone. It works a lot more powerfully on the androgen receptor. And when we look at how the body works, or how the human body works, I like to look at the human body like a car.
Wait.
Sorry. Oh, someone's got the mic on.
I'm not sure what's going on there. Could everyone just mute themselves? Yeah, great. Okay, carry on, Dave. Sorry.
So I don't know if anyone's seen the movie Cars. It's one of my favorite cartoon movies of all time. But basically, the premise of the movie is the cars are alive. They're sentient cars experiencing being alive. And I think that's a very good way to look at the human condition, because we are a machine. We are a very complex, interconnected series of systems. But we are also sentient. We are also alive. We have willpower. Some people have more willpower. Some people have less willpower. We have emotions, and we have choices and decisions that we make. And these are often reactions or impacted by our internal biology. A lot of people who are experiencing depression and anxiety are just experiencing being alive in a sick body and reacting to that and experiencing that in real time. And when your identity and your behaviors and your actions form on a foundation of low testosterone, it can completely fuck the trajectory of your life. Because particularly for younger guys, if you're 18 to 25 and you're meant to be having this peak surge of androgens and you don't have that, not only will your identity form around being less confident, less assertive, lower in the male dominance hierarchy, which we are all aware of and present and interacting with all the time. Also with our interactions with women, they're very aware of the male dominance hierarchy. But the other issue that we have is that the actions that we take and the trajectory of our life massively shifts, because if we're not in that mindset of, I want to take on the world, I want to be confident, I want to leave my mark, I want to overcome risks, the rewards outweigh the risks, I want to take a swing at things, I want to be brave and courageous and have all these traits. If that foundation's not there and you don't act on those things when you're 18 to 25, I think ultimately a lot of guys end up building and leading a life which is a depressing life to live. And that leads to guys being 30 and 40 and lacking the capacity and lacking the strength and lacking the life experience and lacking the ability to command respect and leadership that is going to actually turn them into the man that they want to be. And I think a lot of guys are experiencing this, but they don't quite understand what's going on or where it's coming from. But I think particularly when you talk to younger guys who aren't doing well in whatever metric that looks like, a lot of guys aren't doing well and feel like shit for good reason. If you trash your body and you don't work on self-development and everyone else is, you're going to lose the competition of life. But there are plenty of guys who are doing everything right, or they're doing enough things right that they should be at least a 7 or an 8 out of 10. You know, a couple of drinks on the weekend, a burger here and there. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to live like a monk, but they're not feeling the way they should feel. And I think there's a lot of gaslighting and a lot of misleading from the medical industry and the nutrition industry around what depression and anxiety are, and also how we should be feeling as men. So the caveat to this, the counterbalance to this is that, well, it sounds like if you just inject a bunch of testosterone, then you'll turn into fucking Superman and you won't have any more problems and your life will be fantastic. I can say that for the first couple of years of TRT, before I really knew what I was doing, I mean, I was like 25 and there wasn't really any educational content around this at the time. I expected the testosterone to turn me into the man that I wanted to be. And what I realized was, and this is the most important thing that I've been lecturing on when I've been speaking in the States about this, is this idea of meeting the medicine halfway in terms of showing up and doing the work and allowing the testosterone to make you into the man that you want to be. But the most important thing that we have to look at foundation, at core, is going, where are you at? What's going on with your blood work? And ultimately, do you need to make an intervention, either medically or in terms of your diet and lifestyle? So I like to use the analogy, again, going back to the car thing, in terms of looking at how a mechanic should work. Now, I'm not a car expert. I'm definitely not a mechanic. But if I theorize what should happen if you take your car to a good mechanic, you would explain the details of what's going on. Maybe your car's making a noise, you know, it's not starting properly, whatever. Mechanic pops the bonnet, looks under the hood, goes under the car on the skateboard, you know, does the diagnostic, gives you a theory of what's going on in terms of, you know, your symptoms could be coming from this. We found this. They might also tell you a bunch of other shit they found and try to sell you a bunch of fucking nonsense. That's how they get you. But ultimately, what the mechanic should be doing is going, this is your problem, and these are other areas that need to be serviced. And then this is how we're going to fix the issue. And ideally, if you have a good, you know, relationship with your car and a good relationship with your mechanic, then you would take your car back to that mechanic at regular intervals to keep on top of the servicing of the car, so that, you know, you get it serviced every 6 months, every 12 months. Because what we all know is that if you keep driving the car with the check engine light coming on, you're going to make the situation way worse. You're going to get a much bigger bill and you're going to fuck the car. So the thing that we're looking at here is that this is what we should be doing from a healthcare perspective, and we're not doing it. And this is the importance of working with a good healthcare provider or a health coach, is working from a preventative medicine standpoint rather than a reactive sick care model. So what I encourage people to do is to first find a provider or a health coach or some kind of practitioner who is clued in with optimizing male health, going in, explaining your issues, explaining your medical history, giving them a full insight of what's going on. And they should be performing a comprehensive blood work analysis, as well as a complete workup of your diet, your lifestyle, your habits, your mental health, and ultimately getting this understanding and idea of what is your capacity to operate well holistically. Because a lot of people have perfectly great capacity and optimal foundations. They're just trashing their bodies. But a lot of people are essentially going through life in a piece of shit car, and they're wondering why they suck at driving. And I think that this is one of the difficult experiences that we're having, is that when we're going to healthcare providers or health coaches or, you know, fucking health influencers on YouTube, they're either doing a rush diagnosis, they're not performing proper testing because they wouldn't even know how to interpret the testing if they could. And then they're trying to sell you whatever shit they can make a 10 or 20% commission off, and basically just peddle a bunch of affiliate nonsense. So the thing that's important when it comes to understanding the role of testosterone in your mental and physical health is that it's essentially serving as a life force. And I've got a bunch of lectures on YouTube called The War on Masculinity and Your Brain on Testosterone. It's like a 4-part series. It's like 3 hours of me going into this topic in detail. But to summarize how it works is that the way that the body works is we have a series of all these interconnected systems, and the Western medical model views these as all independent rather than interdependent. And one thing that's connected with your gut, your liver, your kidneys, your stomach, your musculoskeletal system is your consciousness, your brain, your mind, how you're feeling when you're listening to me talk and doing this webinar, and how you're feeling when you're doing day-to-day things. And when we look at how hormones work, hormones are kind of the puppet masters that sit at the top of all these different systems, which all interconnect and flow down with one another. But when we look at what is at the top, we've got diet, and we've got lifestyle, and we've got genetics. And then we've also got, from there, we've got our hormones. And one thing that we're experiencing a lot of now in terms of working in the TRT space is we're seeing younger guys who are like 18 to 30 with the same testosterone levels as men who are 60 to 70, even though these younger guys are doing everything right. So what's supposed to happen is you're meant to get this peak surge, as I mentioned before, in your early years of being an adult, we'll say 18 to 21. And then your testosterone levels gradually decline over the course of your life as you get older. It's called andropause. Whereas with women, what happens is they get their monthly cycles, they get a monthly rhythm, and then they hit menopause like a ton of bricks, or they hit perimenopause, and then they hit menopause like a ton of bricks. We get more of this relatively linear decline over time. But what's happening now, and we believe this is a result, and again, this is just a hypothesis and a theory, but it's a theory that's shared by a lot of the top people in the space, is that as a downstream consequence of all this endocrine disruption we're experiencing, like plastics, pollutions, pesticides, as well as the significantly modified diet since the Industrial Revolution, we're basically seeing a multi-generational downstream consequence of what's happened when we bombard humans with plastic and pollution and change their diet. And what's happening is now, and we're seeing it a lot with women, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I know more women under the age of 30 with either PCOS, endometriosis, or some kind of brutal period problem than I know who are perfectly healthy. This is what we're seeing in men, is we're seeing the same endocrine disruption effect, but because men don't menstruate, we don't get these severely obvious symptoms. But what we are seeing is younger guys with geriatric testosterone levels, which means that younger guys have the life force and the governing hormonal powers of a 70-year-old man. And the problem is that if that's where you're peaking and it's all downhill from there, it's going to open guys up to all the diseases of aging super quickly and prematurely. And we see this a lot now as well. But one of the most important things that testosterone does is twofold. One is it's a massive driver for dopamine production and the production and synthesis of dopamine. So it means that your brain is going to make more dopamine in response to things that it should be making dopamine in response to, which creates a positive feedback loop for motivation, attention, drive, and all these important things. But it also acts as an antagonist and a balancing force to cortisol and adrenaline, which are like our stress hormones. So what happens when you've got high testosterone is that you essentially have a internalized buffer against the effects of stress. So it means that, going to the gym and doing a workout is still hard. Going out and talking to girls is still daunting. Going out and taking risks and challenging and pushing yourself is still just as difficult as it always should be. But the reward that you get from doing so and your ability to adapt and overcome this is much higher. So the juice worth the squeeze. The reward and the benefit is are going to be off the chart. So it leads to a state of generalized anxiety or social anxiety disorders. And then we're also in a situation where we internally don't have these buffers against stress. So what's happening is harder things feel harder than they should, and good things don't feel as good as they should. And then when you're left to your devices over time, this can play out over months and years as a very detrimental and degenerative pattern of a man's life. So when it comes to the stuff that Troy and Tusk talk about in terms of approaching women and dating women and interacting with women, one thing that's very important to understand is that pheromones are very real. The shit that you buy in the gas station bathrooms that's labeled as pheromones, that's crap. But real biological pheromones are a thing. A woman who is ovulating will release pheromones that makes her far more attractive and far more fertile signaling to men, which we find very attractive. It makes them glow. Similarly, hormones and androgens in men are very important drivers of both dominance and leadership in terms of it unconsciously commands respect. But women also pick up on this and men pick up on this too. So when you're going through life, particularly your younger years with low testosterone, the problem is that you are going to understand and you're going to be able to sniff out, like literally, and feel that the other men around you are more capable, have a higher capacity for violence, have a higher capacity for leadership, and a higher capacity for earning resources. So when we're understanding that men are in a dominance hierarchy, which is competitive, it basically puts you in a losing position in a war that you were signed up to from birth. But the other thing is that your confidence, your demeanor, your body language, your verbal acuity, your voice, the way that you interact with women is at core going to be dictated by your hormones. Now, it's not going to make you a Casanova at picking up chicks instantly, but it is going to be something that is going to massively impact your baseline disposition. And it's also going to be something, I mean, I'm not really into the pickup space, but one thing that people talk about a lot is game. And one thing that testosterone does very well is it gives you that sense of inner game because you have that underlying confidence that a lot of the time, if you're faking that, chicks can smell it out because they know it's inauthentic. So testosterone gives you a authentic biological sense of masculinity. And then what you do with that is what turns you into the man that you want to be. So the most important thing that any guy can do before being like, oh, fuck yeah, I want to jump on TRT. This sounds like the best thing in the world. The most important thing to understand with TRT is that testosterone replacement therapy is the last resort because it's shutting down your natural production. So while TRT is completely transformative and life-changing, it's giving you the testosterone that you deserve, and it's making you feel the way that you're supposed to feel as a man for the work that you're doing and where you're at in your life. So you can take all the testosterone you want in the world, but if you don't have any skills, you don't have any competence, you won't have any confidence. And if you don't have a community of people around you, if you don't have goals and passions, you're still going to be depressed. You can take all the testosterone you want. But what's also important to understand here is that the first point of call is to be going, what can we do to optimize our natural testosterone production? Because those are all the things that you have to do anyway if you go on TRT. And this is the main thing that fucks people up. I don't even know how many TRT forums now, and I've made a bunch of YouTube lectures. I've written 2 books on troubleshooting TRT. And the main underlying reason for this, and I just lectured on this in Austin, is what caused the low testosterone, if it was self-inflicted, is what's causing the side effects of the TRT. So if you're in a situation where your testosterone is low because you're eating a bunch of junk food, you're not exercising, you're drinking a bunch of booze, and you're living like crap, if you put a Ferrari engine into a piece of shit Suzuki Swift that needs a service, the car's going to fucking fall apart. You might rip out of the car parking lot and speed out and feel fantastic, and then it's going to fall apart. So if you want to put high performance testosterone fuel into your body, you have to be in a body that would be making that optimal amount of testosterone if it could. But the other softener to that is that if you're off track, if you've had low testosterone for a long time, you're not going to be able to turn yourself into that high performance vehicle overnight, but you can use the testosterone to allow yourself to put the work in and meet that medicine halfway to allow you to actually transform into the person that you want to be. But it's important to understand that it's the last resort, and it's very important that if possible, and if you do have the capacity to make your own testosterone in an optimal fashion, that you try that first. And if that doesn't work, and if you're at the point where you're like, hey, I'm doing everything right, none of this is working, I feel like shit, I'm looking around at all the other guys like me, and I'm training just as hard, I'm eating just as good, I'm doing all the recovery stuff properly, and I'm just not getting the results. Like, one thing I remember is, like, I was lifting weights from like 18 to like 23, and every time I'd go to a new gym, they'd be like, oh, do you want us to like show you how to use the equipment? And I was like, bro, I've been lifting weights for like 5 or 6 years. But my body just wasn't responding to it. And it took me a long time to work out that the foundation was off, and I was doing a whole bunch of work and wasn't getting the results for the work I was doing. And because humans are reward-based creatures, dopamine works based on reward. So things that feel good encourage us to do them more, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. It's important that we get addicted to things that are good for you. is it can put us into a situation where we get off track and it becomes impossible to get back on track. And because doing the work doesn't give us the result and it's so much harder than it should be, it basically creates a situation where we're like, well, fuck it, I'm not even going to try. I'm just, exercise doesn't work for me, dieting doesn't work for me, so why bother? I'm just going to, live out and do these things. But at the end of the day, we're always going to be sitting there being like, I have the capacity for so much more. And we're going to look around at other people and go, hey, like, I want what they have. I want the results that they have. And what you ultimately want to be able to do is you want to be able to do the work that they did to get the results that they've got. And that's where it's this middle point between this entitlement and victim mentality and being like, okay, there's a biological problem. We have a biological solution to this, but now you need to show up and do the work. So what I would encourage anyone to do, if you're currently in a situation where you're like, fuck, maybe I have low testosterone, maybe this isn't, in a good spot for me. What you must do is get a comprehensive blood panel. So not just check your testosterone levels. That's kind of useful, but kind of not. What we actually want to do is check everything all together, all at the same time. So we want to check your lipid values, we want to check your kidneys, we want to check your liver, we want to check your red and white blood cells, we want to check your thyroid, we want to check your adrenal hormones, we want to check your stress levels, and we want to check your androgens and get an idea of going, okay, what's your health history like? Are you taking medications? Are you eating well? Are you training? And is the testosterone the lowest hanging fruit? Or is the low testosterone a symptom of something that you're doing wrong? And a lot of the time people are doing the wrong shit because they don't know better. And that's totally okay. Because a lot of the time people aren't taught about proper diet. They aren't taught about proper training. But the other side of things is that a lot of people are doing a whole bunch of shit that they know they shouldn't be doing, and they're not doing a whole bunch of shit that they know they should be doing. And that can be a very important factor when guys come in and they're like, well, I've got low testosterone. And it's like, yeah, but you've also got fucked triglycerides. You've got your red blood cells jacked through the roof. Your prolactin and cortisol are jacked. And then when you jump, or their livers are fucked, and you jump into their diet and lifestyle and you go, yeah, well, your body is suppressing your testosterone production because it's prioritizing survival because you're treating yourself like shit. So it's very important to have someone who's objective to go through that blood work with you and actually have your best interest at heart to go, okay, what do you actually need to do here? Because if the person interpreting your blood results works on commission selling you TRT, the solution is going to be TRT. Whatever people are selling is going to be the solution if people don't have your best interest at heart when it comes to healthcare. So it's very important that you can sit down with someone to either talk you into TRT or talk you out of TRT if it's not needed, but ultimately work with you to get the results that you need to get and that you're looking for, and to also allow you to go through this metamorphosis. And I like to relate it to puberty. Puberty takes 2 to 5 years of hormone exposure to change you from a child into call it a man child. I don't think men are fully developed at 20, but whatever you want to call it, a fully grown, adult male. And it's also important to understand that if you've got low testosterone and you go on TRT or you fix your diet and lifestyle, that it's going to be a thing that's going to take months and years, not weeks. But it's also something that is going to allow you to continuously move forward and feel better day to day, week to week, month to month, as long as those hormone values are optimal and you're you're doing the right things and showing up properly. So I've seen there's a bunch of questions popping up. Do you want me to just run through the questions and then we can kind of bounce off those? I'm very conscious that I'm just fucking ranting here. Okay, I've got some questions here. So
you can, it's up to you, man. If you want to continue for a while, that's absolutely fine. Or we can start to go through the questions. It's
let's go through the questions, because the questions will kind of act as talking points, and then I can, basically fill in extra points that come off from this, because it's good to understand what kind of people are wanting to know. I mean, I'm sure some people, this is the first time hearing about TRT. Other people might know about this. So that way we can start with some kind of very basic.
There was a question, Dave, actually. Someone said, what is a good level of free testosterone and normal reading of testosterone? What's considered a decent level?
Yeah, and that's a very good question, because the reference range that we're looking at is not a reference range of optimal health. And this is where so many people will look at their lab results and go, oh, well, my testosterone's fine, but I feel like shit. Or they'll go to their GP and their GP will go, oh, well, your numbers are between the two goalposts. So that means that your problems aren't coming from that. And there are a bunch of blood markers that we use where if you are outside the range, it does pretty much suggest that there is a problem. triglycerides being elevated, something called gamma GT and bilirubin being elevated. They're both liver markers. If those are out of range, generally we're going, okay, there's something that needs to be investigated here with a problem. But when we're looking at testosterone levels and hormone levels in general, firstly, if you get bloods done, even at two different locations of the same company in the same state in the same country, you'll get two different reference ranges, but you'll get drastically different reference ranges all over the world. And the reason for that is that the reference range that we're looking at is not a measure of bad to good. It's a measure of what are the last 100 people that we've had come in, what's the mean, the average, and what's the standard deviation away from the mean. So what we're getting is, firstly, it's not young, healthy men who are coming in and getting their testosterone levels checked. It's generally older guys with prostate problems. If you're under the age of 30 and you walk into a GP and say, I want to get my testosterone level checked, they'll look at you and go, you're fine. Especially if you can grow a beard or if you have some degree of musculature, they'll be like, no, you don't even need to look at that, which is asinine. So the problem with the reference range that we're looking at is that you're looking at a reference range, firstly, of elderly men. Secondly, the average person, particularly in Western countries, is either fat, sick, depressed, or all three. If we look statistically, most people are overweight now. A lot of people, I think one in five are on psychiatric medications, and 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 has some kind of diagnosable or subclinical mental illness. So if you want to look at a reference and go, okay, well, these are the average testosterone levels for the average older man walking around, that's probably not somewhere that you want to be smack bang in the middle of, or even in the bottom quartile of. So when we're looking at numbers for total and free testosterone is either how much you're making or how much you're putting into your body. And free testosterone is how much is circulating at any point in time. And blood markers are not the be all and end all of everything. They're a snapshot. They fluctuate daily based on the time of day, what you had for dinner the night before, all these kind of things. But serum testosterone is a pretty fucking accurate measure, especially if you can get like a measurement every few months or a measurement every week over the course of the month or a measurement every year over the course of a few years. You can generally get a trajectory or a ballpark at where you're sitting. So I've got all this written out in my ebook, TRT 101, which you can get off my website, which is very affordable. And it's all written out like I wrote it like a Nintendo 64 instruction manual for TRT. But the way that I will reference it, firstly, I'm using picomole per liter, which is the standard units in Europe and Australia. But if you're looking at the American units, they're going to be in the hundreds. So it's going to sound very confusing. But generally, the reference range will be anywhere from, if you've got a high lab, it'll be like 8 to 30. And if you've got a low lab, it will be like 5 to 25. Back when I started checking my testosterone levels in 2012, the reference range was 10 to 50. So if you compare 10 to 50 to 8 to or 5 to 25, that is a massively different range. And what previously would have put someone in the lower quartile, the lower 25%, would now put you in the upper 25% of the range. So in terms of a number that we're looking at, free testosterone symptoms, which is what's mostly correlated with symptoms, I have found set in below about a 400. And this is a reference range of 2 to 600, or with total testosterone, if you've got normal levels of binding proteins, 15 tends to be about the ballpark level, give or take, where you can start to present with symptoms. But what's very important to understand is that if you're at like a 13 or a 14 total testosterone, or if you're at like a 300 or a 350 free testosterone, and you understand that you're doing everything right, and this is the part that I'm a massive fucking advocate for because I fell into this category. If you're at a point where you're in your mid-20s and you're doing everything perfectly, and that's where your testosterone is peaking, that may not be a level that's going to make you not able to get out of bed in the morning and want to put a gun in your mouth. But that's going to be your peak androgen levels, and that's where unhealthy 70-year-olds are. So if this is where you're going through life now, this is where you're peaking, it's like, yeah, okay, you're not going to feel like a 1 or 2 out of 10, but you're going to feel like a 4 out of 10 on your best day. And that means that for the rest of your life, as you go through, you're going to get gradually worse at treading water. And this is something that I'm really passionate about, is that there's kind of both sides that we really have to look at in terms of being like, well, this is a big intervention if we need to make it, but also understanding being like, well, if you've got a free testosterone of, let's say, 300 or 350, and you're like, look, I'm not doing terrible, but I'm doing okay. It's like, if you doubled or tripled that, you would live a completely different life, and you would be in a completely different place in 5 or 10 years. And that's where we look at the opportunity cost of things, and we look at how life can be very different for people. And this is why I like to, when I'm looking at hormone replacement therapy, you know, these days, I mean, chicks can go out and get tit jobs and BBLs. I mean, you can cut your dick off if you want to these days. I mean, you'll fucking get a government subsidy for doing that if you want to, which is ridiculous. But we're also at a point where testosterone is now only reserved for people who are clinically sick. So if you're 25 years old and you've got borderline low testosterone, and you know that the wheels are going to come off the car if you don't service it, you know where it's heading, why waste the next decade of your life for the car to fall apart and then fix it, when you could fix it now and you know where it's heading and be in a completely different position in 10 years' time? That's the thing I'm a really big advocate for. But also the flip side and the contrary of that is understanding that you're making a commitment to use testosterone for the rest of your life. So it's not something that it's like you shouldn't do this in that position. It's something that you should get educated and have someone working with you to supervise this, because it can be a massive, massive shift for the trajectory of the rest of your life. But yeah, a normal level, sorry, I just talked around the question. A normal level for an average guy walking around these days is about total testosterone, about 15, give or take. And a level of someone who's doing well, healthfully, would be like mid-20s to high 20s. So.
And what are the signs, well, there's another question here, what are the signs of low testosterone in terms of libido and sex life?
That's a good question. I often make a whole bunch of jokes about what the low testosterone symptoms are, but I don't know this audience well enough to give people too much shit. I often say,
yeah, you can give them shit, absolutely.
Right. Having TikTok on your home screen as a male is a pretty good sign. So there's a lot, and it shows up differently for different guys. But the stuff that you see the most in practice tends to be sexual related function, because that's the stuff that guys go, I can soldier through this, everything's all good, but my dick doesn't work properly, I've got a problem. So a lot of the time it will be sexual issues, and it will be guys who are like, they'll be very indifferent towards pursuit of women and pursuit of sex, or they'll be like, hey, my girlfriend or my wife's super hot, she's super into me, she's jumping me all the time, but like, I'll fuck her because I know I should, but like, I'd rather just go to bed, like I can't really be fucked. That lack of lust. So that lustful sex drive, that raw visceral attraction to, you know, whatever you're into, but generally the female form, that is something that is very strongly governed by your hormones. And when that's lacking, it can definitely, you lose a lot of spice of life, because I really believe, and I think it was Aaron Clary said this on a Fresh and Fit podcast. He said that soft feminine energy is the fuel that drives capitalism. I mean, men are not getting out of bed first thing in the morning to shovel fucking garbage and repair sewers to put a roof over their head. They're doing it for either their wives or their girlfriends, or to be able to have soft feminine energy in their lives. It's the driving force that runs men. So if you're not interested in that, then you're not going to have much life force, because you're not going to be much motivated to do the shit you need to do. So a lack of lust, a lack of sexual interest, intermediate sexual dysfunction. One of my favorite, well, not favorite, it's horrible, but one of my favorite examples of this, and I can attest to this personally as well, is when I was talking about before, when you've got testosterone and cortisol, testosterone is kind of like a buffer for these stress hormones. So I'm sure most people in this chat have experienced some form of sexual performance anxiety before. I know I did previously when I had low testosterone. Sex, particularly with a new partner, is supposed to be vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable, very intimate act, but it's also meant to be exciting and arousing and full of passion. So if you're in a situation where you've got low testosterone and you're missing that lust and that animalistic drive, like, you're meant to be there and be like, fuck, I'm self-conscious of how I look. You know, I'm not sure if this is going to be good for her. I'm kind of unfamiliar with what I'm doing. This kind of stuff is very normal thoughts to go through your head as a man. But the other thought that's meant to go through your head is this fuck yeah, animalistic drive of this is what I want to do. If that's not there, you're going to get a stress response that goes through the fucking roof during intimacy. All your blood is going to divert away from your extremities, which is your fingers, toes, and your dick, and you're going to lose your erection. So performance anxiety is a huge one, especially when guys are like, doesn't matter how hot she is, doesn't matter how comfortable I am around her, all that kind of stuff. I just get anxious and lose my erection during sex. it's not because they're too anxious per se, it's because they're lacking that drive and that confidence and that passion that's meant to drown that voice out. So that's a big one as well. And the other one that I see is just, I call it learned fear. I don't like the term generalized anxiety or social anxiety disorder. I think they're bullshit terms. I like learned fear. I think that a lot of guys with low testosterone go through life more fearful than they should be of their surroundings, because they know that they are meek and lack the capacity that they should have, and life is scarier than it should be in all ways. Life is fucking real. Like, life is a scary thing to rock up in. I think that life is just as hard as it's always been. It's just different types of hard. You've got wolves in sheep's clothing now instead of literal wolves. But I think life is difficult for people to navigate. I think life is stressful. And I think that when you have low testosterone, you're going to be more prone to avoidant and procrastinating behaviors, and you're going to be less confident in yourself. And I think that as a result, that over time manifests as fearfulness, which leads to men living a depressing life. Because I think that momentum is the behavioral cure for depression. I think that if you're in a shitty place and you at least start to move forward, you just need some momentum forward, and then you're good. You just need to be able to go, okay, my goal's way fucking down there, but I was back there before and I'm on a roll, and it's because of what I've done and I'm doing well. That is often all men need to just get off their ass and get to where they need to go. They need that drive, and that they need that momentum. A lot of the time, we don't want to sit on top of the castle we built. We want to go build another fucking castle because we enjoy the process of building things. It's what men are like. So when you're lacking that drive and passion, I think that that can lead to a clinical diagnosis of, I call it minor depressive disorder, low-grade depression, anxiety. So yeah, those are the things that I would see.
Just going back to the you mentioned sex, obviously. Do you have any opinion on nofap as a kind of a lifestyle choice out of interest? It's slightly not what you usually cover probably, but do you have any opinion on it?
Yeah, I've actually got a Q&A on YouTube. There was a bunch of us that got asked to do like a collaboration on our thoughts on like porn addiction, nofap, and as a topic. So I spoke more about porn addiction, but the kind of two things into play.
Well, we can cover that as well. Just
right.
Yeah.
So I think, well, one thing that we know for a fact is that being around, and there's a fantastic study that they did. I would have loved to have been involved in this study, where they basically, it's fascinating that they did this with humans, but they basically took a bunch of dudes and they put them in a room with a bunch of women that they found attractive, and they had like physical contact with them, and they measured their hormone levels as a response. And what we found is that being around women that we're physically attracted to increases endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and testosterone. So I think a lot of the time men are self-medicating low testosterone by watching porn. That arousal spike, I think, is something that has an acute antidepressant effect that guys are self-medicating with, because they go, oh, that gives me a charge. And I've spoken to a lot of guys who are like, yeah, I watch heaps of porn. I'm not even jerking off to it that much. I'm just watching it because I like how it makes me feel.
Does the porn actually spike your testosterone a bit then? Because you're virtually in the presence of hot women.
Because the thing is, your brain's not that good at distinguishing between what's on the screen and what's real. And that's one of the issues with having access to porn on demand, particularly when you're going through development as a teenager. I mean, I was very fortunate that I didn't have access to high-speed internet when I was going through puberty, because I would have just fucking belted that shit.
In my day, it was a crumpled copy of Razzle from the newsagents, like a little screwed up, like picture of, and you'd see her tits, and like, that was all you could get back in the day.
Yeah, I used to get surfing magazines, and every now and then there'd be like posters of like a bikini chick or something, like every few months, and that was all we had. Yeah. But there's advantage to that, because it doesn't basically desensitize you and blast your dopamine receptors. I think that sometimes people go a little bit too far with the idea that, and again, I'm sure that there is a good counter argument to this, but where I sit on it, I don't think porn causes the same level of dopamine downregulation as things like cocaine and amphetamines. I think that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
But I think what goes on, so what we do know as a fact is that when you have an orgasm as a man, you get a spike in prolactin. And this is why men can't have, unless you do a whole bunch of tantric training, men don't have multiple orgasms. Once you blow your load, you get that post-nut clarity, and your libido completely drops off. And ideally, that should be for about 15 to 30 minutes, maybe an hour as your refractory period. And this is due to this prolactin spike. And this spike evolutionarily is very important, because it would actually cause us, or force us to pair bond with the woman that we potentially likely impregnated, who without our care and protection and provision for would die in nature. So the prolactin spike post-orgasm is not a bad thing. It's actually very important for pair bonding. But what I predict is happening with a lot of these younger guys is because their testosterone levels are lower, prolactin also goes up with stress. So I think what's happening is that a lot of these guys are basically walking around with basically in a 24/7 post-nut refractory period where they've got these higher prolactin levels at baseline. And then when they do have an orgasm, the prolactin massive spike will then suppress their dopamine very low because prolactin suppresses dopamine. And I think that what's happening is that it's not so much, I think, and this is just where I sit, is that a healthy man should be able to have an orgasm every day, maybe two if he's in a particularly good state. And that shouldn't cause him depression or the inability to perform his tasks and have motivation for the world. I think that that's nonsense. So I think that if someone is like, hey, every time I blow a load, every time I have an orgasm, every time I have sex with my partner, every time I jerk off or whatever, I enter a massive depression spiral for days, there's something underlying that. And I think I personally think that avoiding porn is just better in general for a bunch of reasons, religious reasons, spiritual reasons, in terms of having a greater connection with women, actually driving you to pursue women. I don't think the pandemic would have worked as effectively if there wasn't porn. I think we would have fucking just been like, nah, fucking no way we're going out. So I think porn is very effective at subduing male drive, but I also think that men will always seek out novel feminine content, whether it's through real women or through pornography, just in terms of how we are driven. I think we are wired towards seeking the path of least resistance. But I also think, and this is my take on porn addiction, is if all your problems can be solved by putting your dick away and going outside, you don't have a problem. That's not an addiction.
Well, do you think do you think it just gets talked up a lot online for some reason? It's, these content creators who just bang on the whole time about porn and nofap. I mean, it seems like it. I don't know, man. I mean, I've got a very addictive personality. I've never personally had a big problem with porn. I'm happy to go on there for 2 minutes, knock one out, and then jobs are good. And so I've never had what you would describe as like a big problem with it. Like I'm sort of, I've got massive hard drive or anything like that. Obviously, some people do develop that problem. If you're in a situation where you're knocking one out 12 times a day and you're sitting in a darkened room, that's clearly a problem. But if you're just going on there occasionally and watching a little bit of a free video, I mean, it just seems to me this stuff gets massively talked up online for some reason, maybe because these people are quite puritanical. And it's like, is it really causing? And just one final tiny point. Back in the day, not so much now, but back in the day, I 100% used to be able to masturbate once, maybe a couple of times a day, sometimes using porn, sometimes not, and still go out and pursue women. And it was never a fucking problem. And I think that's because I was so full of juice that it was just, there was enough there to spare, if that makes sense.
I think you're completely right. I completely agree. And I think that these guys are knowing that there's a problem. I think that they know that something's off. And I also think that if you do have low testosterone and you abstain from masturbation and having orgasms and porn, yeah, it will help your drive overall in some way. I mean, if you stay up all night and have a bunch of coffee, that'll help. It won't fix the problem, but it'll help. But with what you're talking about there, I mean, the advantage of porn is that porn's not going to give you an STD. Porn's not going to cause you to get entangled with a BPD or a narcissistic chick. You're not going to get porn pregnant. So when I look at it from a risk to reward ratio, I think, and this is just my perspective, knocking one out here or there and as a way to scratch that itch, as long as it's not derailing your trajectory and your progress as a man, and as long as it's not sacrificing your integrity and you're jerking off to a bunch of fucking weird degenerate shit, I really don't think that it's the massive problem that people make it out to be. And I think that I don't think that porn itself is dopaminergic enough that it can ruin your life like amphetamine or heroin or cocaine or things like this. And I think that it's an underlying behavioral issue. And I think that, yeah, as I said before, if putting your dick away and pulling your pants up and going outside solves your addiction problem, you don't have an addiction.
And just to piggyback on that, if we're separating porn for a moment and just going with benefits of the perceived benefits of nofap, because it tends to swing the other way, doesn't it? Where you've got all these kind of forums, extorting the virtues of nofap, almost putting it in this godlike behavior. Do you on a personal level, do you see any point to nofap as a kind of do you see any massive benefit to it on an anecdotal level, or you just think it's overblown as well, the other way around?
Yeah, I think with most things there's a middle ground. I think that, if you really want to dedicate yourself and work on a project for a defined period of time, I think delayed gratification with all things is very important. But I don't know, like I'm of the standpoint that, like, I guess, you know, porn doesn't fall into that category, but if I've got a beautiful woman in my life who I'm around and I'm having sex with, I find that more motivating. Like, I find that's something that increases my drive. So I think it comes down to people individually, but I really, I would really come back to this idea of, everything that can be done in excess. And I think that delaying gratification and, you know, things like fasting and, you know, not playing video games and doing more exercise and, you know, working intently without distractions on a project and getting in flow state, that's important. And if, you know, abstaining from having an orgasm and not watching porn for a period allows you to apply yourself better to a task, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's something that people should be doing and should be proud to do. You know, if I look back at my, you know, recent trip to the States, I mean, you know, this is probably TMI, but I don't give a fuck. Like, I didn't jerk off for 2 weeks when I was in the States because I was busy. Like, I was speaking at events, I was doing a bunch of like really important shit. I didn't notice it as a problem because I think, and this is what I say to my guys all the time, I think drive is universal. I think that sex drive, I think life drive, I think career drive, hobby drive, I think drive is universal. So if you've got a low sex drive and you've got low drive for other things, I'd put that in the same category. But if you're a healthy man and you're driven towards making money or business or improving a hobby or improving a fitness or whatever, that should also translate over into your sex drive. And I think that it's about having a healthy relationship with it. I don't think you should eat junk food every day, but I think you can, you know, enjoy a burger on the weekend. I don't think you should jerk off to porn all day every day, but I also don't think that doing it every now and then is going to destroy your capacity or your confidence. And if it does, if you do get a big fucking low period after having an orgasm, look at your testosterone levels, look at your cortisol levels, look at your prolactin, look at your thyroid, get a proper health check, and actually speak to a provider and go, this is a symptom, this is what's going on. And a proper health provider will look at that and go, cool, let's look into this.
Makes sense. Cool. The other two questions that came up repeatedly I get asked as a proxy to you, I think, is, and it's two questions that I had actually, which kind of were the preventative things for me, or the things that put me off the idea of going on CRT, which is fertility. If you do want to have kids, how does that work? What's the procedure for that? You work with on guys. I know you mentioned to me you've got a protocol you've worked with and it's been successful. I think all of the time that you've used it. And the other thing is hair loss. These are the two concerns that guys will ask me when I kind of promote out your stuff and go, look, get in touch with Dave, you have a chat. And they're like, but the hair or the kids. And I'm like, well, you're not even putting a muscle, mate. You're not having kids anytime soon. And you're basically bald. So why are you worrying about the hair? But by the by, just for the, I guess, the status quo approach, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, those are kind of two common questions that come up.
Yeah, I don't know anything about hair loss. I've never dealt with that. So I lost my head before TRT. TRT made me suit being bald a fuck ton better though. I tell you what, low androgens and being bald is not a good look. If you look at what, you know, Hollywood or whatever people vote would deem the most attractive men in Hollywood, all the bald guys are hyper androgenic. So it's very important that if you are going to be bald, that you actually can pull it off and suit it.
Some ridiculous stat came out the other day in the UK. It was something like, it was stupid statistic, like 90% of women in the UK find bald men sexy, which is, maybe it's true, I don't know. It seemed very, very high. But of course, then they pick out the ones that they think are hot. And it's, you know, it's Jason Statham, it's that dude from Fast and Furious and shit like that. And you're right, but these guys, when you break it down, they're super fucking masculine, aren't they? You know, so they may be bald, but that's sort of secondary to they've got that super like masculine fucking vibe about them, right?
I don't know if this will show up because of the blur. Oh no, it's not going to show up. Maybe it will. Oh, you can kind of see it there. That was me before I shaved my head. I mean, I used to straighten my hair, diet. I was a singer in a band. I do modeling.
You look like a young Rollo Tomassi, man.
Yeah, that's the goal. I love Rollo's work. So look, I was devastated when I lost my hair. Horrible. One of the worst points with hair loss is realizing that it looks shit and you have to shave it. That's the difficult point where you're like, this no longer actually looks good. It's gotten too thin now to the point that it actually looks terrible. And then you shave it and you go, fuck, that doesn't look good either. So one thing that I did when it happened to me is I got like the scalp pigmentation done, which has faded quite a bit, but I've just kind of let it fade because I no longer really care about it. But the thing that I've mentioned, and I've done a video on this before, particularly around the topic of finasteride, and a lot of people really don't like my perspective on it, but at the end of the day, I think it's the most accurate perspective that's in everyone's best interest, is that going bald sucks, but there's going to be much more difficult things in life that you'll go through. I think that if you have male pattern baldness, it's part of your rite of passage. I would prefer to still have whatever haircut I would want now. I don't know what it would be. Sure, absolutely. But it's not the end of the world. And I think the most important thing for men to understand is that Troy and Tusk, I mean, you guys would know this better than me, is that your value as a man has much less to do with how pretty you are than how your value as a woman is earned. I mean, most of a woman's sexual value comes from how pretty she is. And that's, genetic lottery, right? But when it comes to men, it's like most of your attraction comes from what you can do, not how pretty you are. And your physical attraction cues are less about how sharp your haircut is and more about things like your overall physicality. The issue with losing your hair is that you don't have anything to hide behind. So if you lose your hair, it's going to be much more obvious how your face looks. If you're carrying an extra 10 pounds of body fat, you're not going to be able to get away with it as well because you're not going to be able to divert from it. So I think being bald acts as like a magnifier for who you really are. And I think that one thing that was very scary for me when I first shaved my head is that I realized I didn't have a lot to offer behind the haircut. And I think that that was a difficult thing. And when I look at guys who are absolutely devastated over their hair loss and they're wanting to take hair loss drugs, which have, I mean, people still think that finasteride doesn't cause side effects. The company lost a class action. Like you can go on Reuters and you can read the transcript where they're like, we were aware of the permanent side effects after discontinuation. They wanted to completely ban it and take it off the market in 2021. And the only thing they ended up doing with it was putting a black box warning on it for suicide. So
what are the side effects?
So what finasteride does is the side effects come from its mechanism. So what it's doing is, as I mentioned before, testosterone converts into estrogen and DHT is like super testosterone. And what causes male pattern baldness, as far as we're aware, is guys like me have an overexpression of androgen receptors in the scalp. So as a result, when the stronger androgens bind with these receptors, it suffocates the hair follicle and it causes what's called miniaturization, which is where it like thins and goes wispy and shit, and then it just doesn't grow back. So what finasteride does is it blocks the 5-alpha reductase enzyme, which is what converts testosterone into DHT. So while you may then net less androgenic activity in your scalp, you're going to net less androgenic activity everywhere else, in the brain, in the body, in all the organs. And the big issue that we see with this is that there is a portion of guys, some people say it's 1%, some people say it's 10%. I don't know, I'll smack it in the middle at 5%, is that they stop taking this drug and the side effects don't go away. It becomes permanent. And this is called post-finasteride syndrome. And I just did an interview with a guy who recovered from it. And a lot of the time using testosterone can fix and resolve it over about a year, but it's definitely not a guarantee. There's a lot of guys who haven't been able to reverse this, and it's absolutely fucking devastating.
So what are their condition then? Are they just depressed, or they're like, how's it affecting them?
Basically just all the symptoms of super, super, super low testosterone. So complete depression, complete loss of sexual function, shrinkage of the penis, complete loss of muscle mass, just life just becomes absolutely fucking ruined. And then when we put a bunch of testosterone in, because the gate towards super testosterone is closed, they get more flood down towards estrogen. And then it seems like the body might rebalance over time, but we do not know how to fix it. And that's the big issue, is that we don't know how to cure this. So my biggest piece of advice for men from like a top-down approach to, if you're dealing with this, is do not take a drug that will act as insurance policy for staying pretty if it's going to compromise your ability to have capacity, because capacity is more important than how pretty you are. And I have found that to be very true, in terms of my life and my relationships. But that's the main thing that guys need to be aware of when it comes to hair loss, is that if you are predisposed to it, TRT will make it happen faster, but it won't make it happen if you're not predisposed to it. There's plenty of guys running a fuck ton of steroids who have a beautiful full head of hair. There are plenty of guys with fuck all testosterone who are bald as shit. So it will make the inevitable happen faster. And I think that if you are going to go bald, you will suit being bald. I'm biased, but you will suit being bald much better if you're more androgenic, because testosterone masculinizes all your features, not just your physique.
Well, I mean, it's funny because because you look great how you are, obviously, you know, and it's sort of like, I suppose, coming from our perspective, because I mean, I know I've asked you about hair loss, and Tusk has, and we don't even think, fuck, this guy's at some point lost his hair, and they're like, oh, how does he feel about it? Because you look so good anyway that it's just, we don't even think about it. It's like, yeah, he looks fucking cool, but how would I look, you know? And it's like, so I don't know what I'm getting at with that, except to say that I think you're right. I mean, it could definitely. It's something you could accept, and I think the more masculine your features, the more you can make it work for you, right? And you can make it, you can build it into a look that's going to actually probably be more powerful than you were before.
Yeah, completely. I mean, people can scroll down my Instagram. You can see my old shit, exactly how I used to look if people want to scroll through. But I mean, I would have been like 65 kilos. I used to straighten my hair. I used to wear eyeliner. I used to wear skinny leg black jeans, and I was a singer in an emo band. Worked very well, but that look, bald, does not work. So
yeah.
When I went bald, I was like, okay, I have to find a way to suit this, and I have to find a way to rock this. Fortunately, I had good beard genetics, so that was a good trade. But I essentially had to build up my shoulders more, taper down my waist more, and build a more masculine physique that made me rock being bald. And I think that's the most important thing for guys to understand, is being like, you've been dealt the hand that you've been dealt, and you've got to make it work. The ball has landed where it's landed, and when it comes to the things that, you know, give men value, and, you know, Rolo and you guys have all done such a fantastic job at kind of putting this out to the world in terms of helping men understand this, is that there are so many things that you can do for your physical attraction that will outcompete the freshest haircut on a dude who's out of shape. And I think one of the most important things for your attraction cues as a man, I mean, I'm not attracted to men, so I can't comment on this, but in terms of feedback that I've received and what I've observed, is that your confidence, your body language, your demeanor, and your presence and how you show up, that's more important than your fresh haircut. So that's the main thing to look at with male pattern baldness, is it's not going to make you go bald, but it will make you go bald faster. But you just need to basically step up to the plate and suit it. And yeah, I believe that the day that I got my head shaved, I went to the barber and I said, is it time? And he took a look at it and he was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I cried. I'm 90% sure I cried in the chair. And then after a week or so, I was like, fuck, I need to start hitting the gym a bit more and make this work for me. And I think that that's the important thing for guys to understand. And what was the topic? It was hair loss and...
I think it was, so hair loss, and then what was the other one that Tusk mentioned? Then it with a whole other area, which is children, having kids.
Oh, fertility, right. So, and again, not intentionally plugging my book, but I did just release a book. I just wrote a book on this and put it on my website. And I've also got a YouTube video as well. If people want to watch the YouTube video, you can just search Dave Lee Fertility on YouTube and it will come up. But firstly, if testosterone was an effective means of contraception, we would all be using it as birth control. It would be the best male birth control of all time. So if it was a perfect means of contraception and therefore it made everyone infertile, it would be much more popular. So TRT complicates fertility, and anabolic steroids on top complicate it further. In my experience, the guys who want to stay fertile become infertile, and the guys who want to be infertile stay fertile. That just seems to be how it works. It's how life works. But what we've found, and I mean, I've worked with a whole bunch of guys on fertility. I never intended to be a fertility expert or a specialist, but it's just been something that I've fallen into out of necessity, is that there's a bunch of things to look at. One is that if you've got low testosterone for factors that have been impacted in terms of by age or that you've done to yourself, if you were infertile before you started TRT, which a lot of guys don't realize they are, you're going to be even more infertile on TRT. That's a big factor. But
when you say infertile, does that mean technically is that low sperm count? Is that what you mean?
Right. So when I say infertile, I mean what would be called azoospermia, which is like zero, which is like you can cream pie all you want. There's a 0% chance something's going to happen.
But what if you're just low? You know, like you're not zero, but you're sort of somewhere in the, I don't know, 20% or something, 15% or something.
And this is generally what we see with TRT when guys run the sperm tests, is that guys often don't run a preliminary sperm test before they start TRT, because like, why would I? Yeah. But what we do get with a lot of guys on TRT is that you get basically somewhere between, like, it's like below range, but still present, which means that you absolutely can still get someone pregnant, but you're just less fertile than you would normally be.
Yeah.
I'm walking around here, and again, this is just my perspective, is that if you're not trying to have a family and you're, maybe learning about, cold approach and dating women, Is that a bad thing? Is being subfertile when you're not wanting to have a kid, is that the worst thing in the world? I don't think so.
No.
But it's definitely complicating something that's very important, because, you know, if you want a family and if you want to be a father, that's a very important thing for the trajectory of your life and your role as a man. So it's important for guys to understand and go, yeah, TRT is going to complicate this shit. It's going to complicate it, but it's not going to be a deal breaker. And many guys do not need fertility protocols because they still are super fertile. You don't hear about those guys on the internet. You don't hear about the majority of guys on TRT because they don't have troubleshooting side effects. But on the internet, at the moment, the discourse is that TRT will make you infertile. And this is my undergrad's in marketing, and the most effective marketing strategy of all time for any business, and this is how all marketing strategies work at core, is create a problem you didn't know you had and sell you the solution. So if I say to you, hey, TRT is going to make you infertile, but here's an insurance policy that means that, you know, and it's called HCG, which means that you're not going to lose your fertility. If you can put that on a sales call with someone who's already bamboozled and bewildered, that's the easiest upsell ever. It's like the would you like a fries and a Coke with that. What we know about McDonald's is they make the majority of their profits on the fries and the Coke, not the burger. TRT clinics make a huge amount of profit on things like aromatase inhibitors and HCG. So the thing to understand with fertility is that a lot of the time they'll sell people HCG, which is like a female pregnancy hormone that keeps your testicles active. That does not prevent infertility. All kinds of people at the moment are coming on YouTube saying, yeah, that's what you should do if you want to have kids. If you go on TRT, that's how you preserve your fertility. They're not people who actually work with people. If that was the case, we wouldn't need fertility treatments because we'd just do that. So what I have found, and this is listed in the book, it's also on YouTube, all the dosing and stuff's on YouTube for free, is that if you were fertile before you started TRT, you should be able to be just as fertile on TRT if you add in this protocol, which is FSH, which is the bioidentical signal from your brain to your testicles to make sperm, and your prostate to make everything to do with spermatogenesis, fancy word for making jizz. And that's something that people generally take 3 times a week with the HCG daily. And if you do that for a 12 to 16 week period, that's how long it takes to restore your sperm count. So everyone's case by case. I don't like to make, you know, reckless promises or things like this. You know, people can have different approaches to this, but the way that I recommend guys look at it is, firstly, focus on your ability to be a competent and capable father. Any dude who can make jizz can be a dad. Not every dude can be a father. And you guys know very well the outcome of people who are not well fathered, particularly women. It's fucked up a whole bunch of shit. Daddy issues is notorious. So the most important thing for having a kid is to actually be capable of being a father. And I think the most important aspect of being a father is to first be able to look after yourself and then be able to look after others. So if you can't even look after yourself and you've got geriatric hormone levels at 25, the least of your concern should be reproduction. So yeah, that's the most important thing, but also understanding that you can use a fertility treatment when it comes time to conceive. And it's generally, and it hasn't been something that I've seen being a problem. The only guys who I've seen fail the protocol are guys who had like severe testicular injuries before they started TRT, and it was a long shot to begin with.
Oh, the guys that weren't able to finally reproduce.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, the guy, like, if someone, you know, let's say you know, got hit by a car in the balls or something and their testicles were just fucking destroyed. Like some guys who've had testicular cancer and like chemotherapy to the testicles, they're not going to respond to a fertility protocol. No way. But
fine. Yeah.
I mean, I've been on TRT now for 7 years. I don't use any fertility adjuncts and I'm fertile as shit. So it does complicate it for a lot of guys, but for the guys who it does complicate it for, you can use a fertility treatment. It's cheaper than IVF. And I also, again, this is just my personal perspective, but some guys are like, oh, should I freeze my sperm before I start TRT? One, look at the cost of IVF and the cost of the monthly freezing costs. And also understand that when it does come time to retrieve your sperm, a lot of the time the sample is no longer viable and you're not going to get your money back.
Really? Shit.
Oh, yeah. Happens all the time.
What, do they just turn around and say, oh, sorry, man, it's not viable anymore. Sorry, mate. There you go.
We lost it. The sample's dead because potentially it wasn't kept at the right temperature and the temperature fluctuated or whatever. Or people leave it too long. And that's the big thing that guys don't understand. And the same with women when they freeze their eggs as well, is that it should not be your primary fail-safe for having a family. It's a good plan B. It's fucking expensive. And I'm not too big on the idea of, you know, conceiving children outside the body, but just understanding for guys that, yeah, it's going to complicate your fertility, but it's also something that we can very easily uncomplicate. And again, I've put YouTube videos on the protocol. I wrote the most affordable, clearly to understand book that anyone can get for like 30 bucks Australian, which is like $5 US now. So, and the content's all there. Providers all over the world are catching on to how to do this. So I wouldn't be talked out of TRT by the fertility complication factor, unless you're wanting to conceive in the next 6 months. If you're like, hey, I want to have a kid in the next 6 months, start the TRT after you conceive. Don't complicate something prematurely.
Yeah, okay.
But if you want to have kids in a decade, don't be hypergonadal for the next decade, because, I mean, good luck finding a good wife.
Well, yeah. No, you make a very good point about, your capacity and your fitness as a father is, going to be determined to some extent by your testosterone. So there's a balance with these things. But James, have you got a view on what the next question should be? Because there's a number of questions coming through in the chat here. I mean, there's a few.
Yeah, I'm just going. These are quite specific.
Somebody asking about sunscreen, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, these are quite specific about specific, readings and ranges. And again, the best way to do this is get your bloods done. We're going to send all of you a full list after this. Dave has provided that kindly before, and then you book in an appointment with Dave for him to analyze it. It's that simple. So the ones that I've had frequently, again, to be as a proxy to pass on to Dave, have been, what are the best, if any, natural testosterone boosters on the market, or is it all fluff? And if you were naming the 3 top supplements to take, non-anabolic supplements, which would those be as the kind of keys to the kingdom?
Right, that's a good question. Okay, so the most popular testosterone boosting supplements on the market at the moment are Tongat Ali and Fedosia agrestis. This was started, well, I wouldn't say it was started, because Tongat Ali was very popular a decade ago. It just went away because people realized it was snake oil bullshit. But recently, these 2 supplements were popularized by people like, I think Andrew Huberman was one of the first people who was talking about it. And one of the things that's very concerning with this, and people can fact check me all you want, there's a website called examine.com. And this is basically like, it's a great website. It's presented like Wikipedia, but it presents all the research either in animals or humans on natural supplements. And then what it does, it kind of gives you like summaries and breakdowns so you can see what's going on. So Fedosia agrestis has never been studied in humans, ever. So people on YouTube are being like, oh, it increases testosterone by this, it does this. There is 0 studies in humans. It will never be studied in humans because it failed animal studies for toxicity. So what it did in rats, and this is the only study, and again, this is on Examine, and people reference the study all the time, is that I think it was over an 8-week period, it massively increased testosterone levels and the size of the testicles, but it caused the testicles to swell due to cellular toxicity. So that's like saying, oh, I got massive arms because I just punched myself in the bicep over and over again. It's like, well, yeah, good for you. So to me, that's very concerning because we have absolutely no idea what this is going to be doing to people. And it could potentially be compromising the thing that they're trying to improve. So never, ever, 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 ever take pharmaceuticals. I won't go left field on that, but I think people know what I'm saying. Never take anything, pharmaceutical or natural, that is sold to you that hasn't been tested in humans for safety and efficacy, ever. So Fedosia agrestis has not been studied in humans, and therefore, it was toxic in animals. So no one will ever be able to do a study in humans because it failed animal studies. The way that these studies work is they tested in animals short term, they tested in animals long term, and then they tested in humans short term and tested in humans long term. You can't run something in humans if it poisoned the animals. It's not ethical. So I don't know how people are selling that, and I don't think it will stick around for too much longer. But Tongat Ali is a very interesting one. I've got a YouTube video on, I think it's called Tongat Ali is Bullshit. My friend and mentor, Jay Campbell, he's the one who's been harping on about this for a decade. Is Tongat Ali is we theorize, it's a phytoandrogen. So when we look at like phytoestrogens like soy, Tongat Ali is like an androgenic version of that. So that's not a bad thing. But Tongat Ali does not increase your testosterone production. It acts like a plant version of testosterone in your body. There are other equisteroids like laxagenin, a few others that are sold for this purpose, but they're plant-based androgens which interact with the receptor. And the reason why we know that it doesn't increase testosterone is if you take a supplement, and I'll get to the next one, which actually does this, is if something increases testosterone, it had to come from something happening. So if you take a supplement and your testosterone goes up, we have to work out what did the supplement do to actually increase the testosterone. And what we found with the Tongat Ali studies is that the signals from the brain to the testicles to make testosterone don't move. So the testosterone on paper just came out of nowhere. And that's why we hypothesized that it's just a plant version of testosterone, and it's somewhat effective in short term, but it also may have long-term issues. We're not sure. It does seem to be very dopaminergic and anti-cortisol. So I don't think Tongat Ali is something that's poisonous that people should avoid, but I think that it's not a substitute for TRT. And most importantly, and this is the thing I'll drive home, is if you have clinical hypogonadism, if you have low testosterone, Tongat Ali might make you feel less shit, but it's not going to solve the problem. If you have optimal testosterone levels and you want to get like an aphrodisiac, androgenic, dopaminergic boost, Tongat Ali, gelatinized maca, and you want to always never get raw maca powder. Maca is meant to be boiled. The Peruvians laugh at Caucasian people who have it raw. They boil it. It's a root. So gelatinized maca has already been boiled, so it won't destroy your stomach. It will actually work properly. You can just Google gelatinized maca. Those work as good aphrodisiacs, but the only natural supplement that has been shown to increase testosterone long-term is KSM-66 ashwagandha. This is on their website. There's a very good infographic and breakdown, but what it shows is that because it reduces stress very potently, it works like a benzodiazepine. It actually increases testosterone production if the low testosterone issue is due to stress. However, ashwagandha is not that well tolerated by a lot of people. It can make a lot of people feel unmotivated, spacey, down, because it does work like a plant version of Valium. I think, Tusk, you didn't react well to it, did you? You didn't like it?
No, I felt really tired and really sluggish from it, weirdly.
Yeah. And a lot of people feel like that from it, whereas a lot of people, it gives them a boost, makes them feel fantastic. But that's the only thing on paper that has been clinically shown to increase testosterone. There is a great book. Let me just check what it's called so I don't get this wrong. So the guy called Christopher Walker, and he wrote the best book on boosting natural testosterone that I've ever read. So his website is anabolicmen.com. He's got a training program, and he's also got a testosterone boosting book. And that's basically, what's it called? Christopher Walker, testosterone. I really want to get this right because this book's really valuable. It's called Master Your T. You can get it on Amazon. I've never spoken to the guy. I don't have any affiliation with him, but that book is great. And it focuses on the diet, lifestyle, anti-stress, optimizing your nutrition patterns. Boron is something that people talk about a lot. So boron will increase your free testosterone because it reduces your binding proteins, but then your body just gets used to it and it just goes back to normal after a while. So that doesn't work. When it comes to what supplements work the most that I think people should look at,
maybe top 5.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to look at things firstly from a nutritional standpoint. So what are the foundations that are required by your operating system? There's a guy called Paul Saladino. He talks about the human operating system pretty well. Like if we're going to install programs on your Windows computer, which, I mean, I don't know who still uses a Windows computer. Sorry, anyone. But if we're looking at a Windows computer, yeah, some ways, my apology. Microsoft Word, Microsoft Office, Excel. Like what are the foundational things that are made for your operating system that your operating system is made to run with? And these are nutrients. So I like a foundational combination of animal organs, organic greens powders, and high quality, non-rancid, non-oxidized fish oil, because omega-3, bioavailable nutrients, antioxidants, and minerals are very important for the human foundation. And having those in combination will nourish the diet in a way that you're getting a whole bunch of dense micronutrition like vitamins and minerals with a very small amount of calories. Now, people can also use a synthetic multivitamin. If people want to use a multivitamin, I recommend the one from a brand named Thorne, Thorne. It's called Basic Nutrients. I have found, though, that subjectively, people feel better getting their nutrients from plant and animal-based sources. It's just important if you're going to use greens, it should be organic. And when it comes to things like liver and organ capsules, it's cheaper if you just eat the liver, but it tastes pretty potent. And if you're going to use a fish oil, you need to make sure that it's actually a good quality one. So never skimp on fish oil quality. This is I spent fucking like a full day pulling up an Excel spreadsheet, going through all the best fish oil supplements, and then disqualifying all the shit ones and being like, what's the most economical bang for your buck, best one? And it just so happens it comes in a very cool looking bottle. So it's this one here. So it's called omega-3 triple strength from a brand called Sports Research. And that will give you a gram of, so even when you're looking at the triple strength fish oils, this one's still stronger. So this one's fantastic. I take 4 of these a day. You don't need to take that many, but taking 2 of these a day is like eating like 100 to 150 grams of wild salmon a day. That's a good amount of fatty fish to eat. So I would look at that. Then when it comes to supplements beyond that, one of my favorites, which again, I've done a YouTube lecture on, is called phosphatidylserine. I'm not going to spell that, but if you search on iHerb or Amazon, just search P for Peter, S for Sally 100, PS 100. Jarrow make a very good version of that. Doctor's Best make a good version. MRM make a good version. And Christopher Walker talks about that in his book in terms of what's the most side effect free, best tolerated supplement to reduce cortisol and stress. This is what I take before doing a podcast like this. This is what I take before public speaking. If I was going out on first dates and stuff with chicks, that's what I would take. What's something that can reduce stress, but not intoxicate and sedate you and make you dopey and dumb? That's phosphatidylserine. So 3 of those soft gels before bed every night is what I recommend for like 90 to 95% of my clients. And then for the things that are going to be the most androgenic, I like things in 3s, is carnitine, creatine, and choline, the 3 C's. And then I look at vitamin D as a 4th, but ideally you're going to get vitamin D from the sun. If you live, in Eastern Europe like me, you want to supplement with it. And I've got a lecture on vitamin D as well, but 5 to 10,000 units of vitamin D a day. And then for the 3 C's, carnitine tartrate, 1 to 2 grams per day will upregulate the androgen receptor. 5 grams of creatine per day will increase your body's ability to make dihydrotestosterone, DHT, and it will basically make your training and performance better in the gym as well as cognitively. And phosphatidylcholine, which is the best form of choline, you can get that from eating a few eggs every day. But what that's going to do is help your liver detoxify toxic estrogens from the environment. So carnitine, creatine, choline, the 3 C's. Vitamin D, that doesn't fit into my 3 C's, but that's the extra one. But the foundation is the beef organs, the greens, and the fish oil. I find that those are what produce a subjective difference in how people feel.
Any brand you recommend for beef organs?
Yeah, if you're in I don't sell or mark up any fucking supplements, and I never will. So these are just the ones that I found that are the best. But for like an international one, this one comes from, I think these are Argentinian cows, but Code Age is the one. Yeah, Code Age beef organs. iHerb, Amazon. I found that when you're getting beef organs, it's important that it's not defatted because that reduces a lot of the nutrient content. I take 6 of these a day, and I do find that if you take this with the greens in the morning and the fish oil, you get a phenomenal boost, a reduction in your appetite. And when it comes to the greens, here. Oh, no, here it is. So this is the greens that I've been recommending for a long time. I used to be very pro carnivore, and I used to think that greens were all shit and bad for you. And then I went, okay, I'm going to try taking a triple dose of greens for a month and see if it makes a difference. And within like a week, my wife was like, what are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, you look different. I want what you're doing. And I was like, no, you don't want to take 3 scoops of greens a day. It tastes like shit. But I've been taking that consistently since because of how damn good it makes me feel. And I was someone who I was like, I'm just wanting to prove that this is bullshit. And I had to eat my words on it. So this is the product I use. It comes in capsules for people who, like if you're traveling and you don't want to drink greens, this is great. It comes in capsules, but you go through a bottle pretty quick and it's less economical. So I take these on the road, and I take eight of these a day when I'm traveling. And a lot of my clients use these instead of the powder, but this also comes in a powder. You can get like 120 serves. You can get like 15 serves if you want to try it. It's all organic. It doesn't have any flavoring in it at all. A lot of it, like greens, taste like shit. So a lot of the time companies will put a massive amount of sweeteners in there, which will cause digestive discomfort, and it still tastes like ass anyway. So I just get this powder and I just mix it with orange juice and just fucking shot it. Very doable, very downable, and you get a very good boost in energy from it. The other one that people can try if you want something that is flavored, there's a brand called Amazing Grass, and they make one that's chocolate flavored. And chocolate masks the taste of greens much better than like tropical or berry or whatever people are putting in there because it's quite earthy. So that one, they just put like a few grams of cacao in there to give it a flavor as well. And that's very doable. It just tastes like like vegan protein powder, really. But that's the, yeah, they're the brands I would get. All of Amazon, all of iHerb. I don't make any commissions off those.
Nice. Troy, anything else to cover?
No, it's great stuff. Let's have a look and just see if there was any further questions here. I mean, there's some quite, like James said, there's some quite fairly specific ones on here that probably it's good to just get a, you know, consultation really. What about, okay, what are your opinion on possible negative long-term effects of TRT on the quality of your heart, liver, and arteries?
Yeah, I just saw that. I was going to say, I'm going to answer that one because that's a really good question. So
yeah.
I just got back from speaking at the Olympia and the Silverback Summit with like a panel of you know, I gave a talk, but also did a panel that this came up, you know, quite extensively. There's a guy on YouTube called the Anabolic Doc, and he's a cardiologist, and he is the best person to look at his content around the heart, because he's been using testosterone for years. He's been treating people on testosterone for years, and he's a fucking cardiologist. So ask the experts. And there's a fantastic study, and he referenced this at the Olympia, and if he hasn't made a video, he'll be making a video on it very soon. But it was actually the first interventional trial on TRT for cardiac disease, and it actually caused no detriment and improved people's parameters. The thing that's important to look at when we look at these testosterone studies that have been done is that the vast majority of them have been done, and you can read this in the methods, is they're giving them to men who are generally extremely hypertensive, often diabetic, elderly, and obese. And they're giving them a massive dose of testosterone every 2 weeks. And it's going, yeah, this makes blood pressure worse and potentially could cause more arterial complications. Absolutely. If you put a Ferrari engine into a Suzuki Swift, it's going to destroy the Suzuki Swift. Doesn't mean that the Ferrari engine's a bad engine. So this is something where it's very important, as I've said, you know, in all these talks, is you have to live and be in a way that you would be making the amount of testosterone that you would be putting into your body. I.e., if you are, you know, a 60-year-old obese alcoholic, the amount of TRT that you should take would not be the same as a healthy 21-year-old. Because that's what's going to be physiological for the 21-year-old is going to be super physiological if you're sick and out of shape. So testosterone is something that is protective for the heart. It is protective for the liver and the kidneys. I've done a full liver masterclass on YouTube that people can check out. I'm very into liver health, but using high doses, like super physiological doses of androgens, is going to burden your system too much. But a lot of the toxicity comes from too high of a dose, or using the non-bioidentical anabolic steroids. So a lot of the time, testosterone gets lumped into the same side effects as what gets caused from non-bioidentical anabolic steroids. And optimal testosterone levels, and this is the most important thing to come back to, and my friend Dr. Jordan Grant, who's a urologist, he harps on about this quite a bit as well, is that what we are doing with TRT, I mean, if you want to take like a fucking massive testosterone steroid cycle, yeah, you'll fuck up all your organs, 100%. And you can take all the fucking, I don't know what they say to take now, bergamot and red yeast rice extract and all this stuff, you'll still fuck your organs. But the optimal amount of testosterone for a healthy male is protective against all your systems. Otherwise, we would see everyone at 18, 19, 20 who's super healthy having heart attacks, having liver disease, having, you know, chronic kidney disease, because of that's when they've got optimal testosterone levels. So it's important not to push the dose too high. But the most important thing for guys to understand is that you have to live and be in a body that would be making that amount of testosterone if it could.
So you've almost got to rise up to the plate then, in a sense. You got to, if you're going to boost yourself up, you've got to then rise to that challenge.
And I thought when I first started this, and this is why I'm so fucking, I'm just like a broken record with this, is I spent 2 years thinking that it was going to pull me up to the plate. I was like, well, like I feel
let it happen, sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, and it's something that we talk about a lot when it comes to psychedelic therapies, is that like you have to actually meet the medicine halfway and show up with intention and do the work. And that's what makes testosterone work for you, because when we look mechanistically at how something like amphetamine works, you can take a bunch of amphetamine, stare at a wall, and your dopamine will go through the roof. With testosterone, it's not doing that. It's actually just making your body respond in the way that it should respond. But now you have to go and actually do the stimuli that you should be doing. The problem is that if you failed diet and exercise 10 times, it takes a lot of fucking courage and support to go back and do it the 11th time and see it through.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's really important. And this is just my angle is, and this is why it was so helpful when I found like your videos and Rich's videos and Rollo's videos and Andrew Tate's videos years ago, is it helped me logically understand something that bamboozled me. I was like, I don't understand this shit. This is confusing. But now I'm like, okay, this all, intersexual dynamics, how women and how men work. Okay, I can logically look at this, and that helped me understand and solve the problem. I think men are hyperlogical. So I really like to explain to guys and go, look, ideally, you could just take the testosterone and become the Rock, and that would be problem solved, and it would be fantastic. But it doesn't work like that. And this is what we found in practice is the thing that turns TRT into something health promoting rather than something that could be detrimental to your health.
Yeah, fair enough. No, good stuff. There's a question here from Miguel. Now, I think it'd be kind of interesting to ask this because this is a good, like, we know Miguel, he's in our group, The Edge. I've known Miguel for a while. But this question is similar to a lot of, when we talk about testosterone, we get this kind of thing a lot. So although this is a specific case, if you could just, if I just read it, I'm 45 years old and my T levels have always been high, both the free and the total T levels. SHBG is also high and estrogen is high. A couple of doctors said that definitely T is not a problem in my case. Do you think I have T level problems based on my description? Now, with all due respect to Miguel, who's a lovely guy, he does seem to be the kind of bloke that we would sort of say, well, come on, man, you need to have a bit more drive. You need to bring a bit more oomph into all of this stuff. So, from that point of view, you might think, well, is T an issue? But I've talked to Miguel and many guys actually, and they will say, well, no, I've looked at the T. The T's fine. So that's not a problem. But what's your take on this? Looking at this on a little bit of a deeper level.
Yeah, these are the kind of cases that I get. So the thing that I love about what I do is I tend to inherit the people who are like Miguel, who've been told that they don't have a problem, or they
mainstream doctor says no, it's not an issue. It's not an issue.
Yeah, I get the troubleshooting cases. So I'm very big on working out what the problem is. So there has to be something going on. Now, one thing to look at and consider very strongly is that negative thyroid symptoms, and like if I put a Venn diagram of hypothyroid symptoms and low testosterone symptoms, it's all crossover. They're all the same. So thyroid, T3, is also one of your main regulatory factors for aromatase, which is estrogen production. So I would be doing kind of what I was saying before, is getting that comprehensive lab panel that's looking at everything and working out what's going on. So the other things that are very common, and again, I'd look at the War on Masculinity Part 2 on YouTube is a good one to look at for this, is checking the thyroid and checking the liver. And if those things are both in check, auditing diet, lifestyle, if pharmaceutical medications are being used, particularly SSRIs, checking for insulin resistance, checking for obesity. And, some people don't realize, some people are like, look, I'm not that fat physically, but they could actually be insulin resistant and pre-diabetic, which would also be impacting these things. So it's very important in this kind of scenario to get the comprehensive blood work, everything all together, and then having it reviewed by someone who can look into this.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting thing because as I say, I've spoken to a number of dudes, and I was probably a similar kind of boat myself, before I started working with you, Dave, where it's sort of like you get a very perfunctory kind of like testosterone reading, or you do your, and you're like, yeah, no, that's fine. The testosterone is fine. That's not the problem. Or hormones aren't the problem, but my life is still not optimized. I'm still not where I want to be. And it seems, having worked with you and obviously knowing, what you've done with Tusk and other people, it's sort of like, it seems like, no, you need to take another look at this. It's not as straightforward as you just go to your general practitioner in the UK or America and say, hey, look at my testosterone. He goes, no, that's fine. It's not a problem. There's more to this than meets the eye.
Hugely. The amount of times that I'll find fatty liver disease by doing like a liver blood test and following up with an ultrasound, finding like subclinical hypothyroidism, even finding Hashimoto's, which hasn't been detected before, and also finding pre-diabetes. I mean, all of these things are big factors, but other factors as well is that people can be taking pharmaceutical medications that they have no idea are causing them problems. And people can also have these habits which are really detrimental, or they can be looking in something and go, hey, my levels are high. And it's like, nah, bro, the range is actually low. And this is actually something that could be causing symptoms. So it's very important to have someone to look at it who can go, how can we actually make you healthy and thriving? Because most doctors are just good at working out if you're dying or not.
Yeah. And like you said as well, the problem's even worse with people who are younger, because if you're under 30, it's just game over, isn't it? They're just going to go, yeah, it's nothing. Your testosterone's fine. That's not a problem.
Yeah, have an SSRI, go away, and good luck with your problems. And the thing that will make it, the thing that makes subclinical hypogonadism the worst in terms of like if you've got borderline low testosterone levels, you throw an SSRI at that and you're going to get every fucking side effect under the sun and everything's going to be much worse. So unfortunately, they'll gaslight you and go, oh yeah, it's just you've just got depression, which cannot be tested for objectively. And generally it's coming from, and I mean, if a doctor's going, you're depressed, you should be running comprehensive lab work and referring them to a counselor. Address both sides.
Absolutely. No, good stuff. Okay. Any other questions? If there's any other questions in the chat, or James, have you got anything else you wanted to?
I'm going to cover the tribulus and stinging nettle because I think that's a good topic.
Yeah. Any of the questions, Dave, you want to cover? Please jump in and do so.
Yeah, I'll just blast through the ones I can cover. So stinging nettle and tribulus are crap as well. So what happens is, so they also block 5-alpha reductase. So what happens is if I run a study and I say we gave 50 guys, let's say tribulus and stinging nettle together, and we saw a 20% increase in testosterone, I can market that and go, well, that's a testosterone booster. But if you got that increase from reducing DHT, which is how it gets increased, you're now actually netting less of an androgenic effect overall. So it's actually having an anti-androgenic effect. And that's why people, who take tribulus and stinging nettle, they don't go, oh yeah, this was a game changer. My life's so much better now that I started taking this crap. It's just unethical marketing from the supplement industry, which is something that, my background was in the supplement industry when I first got into this. And it can be very misleading and concerning. And if people are looking for the supplements to help with testosterone production, carnitine is going to be the carnitine, creatine, choline, vitamin D. They're the best things. Now, in terms of regularly eating steak 2 to 3 times a week, as almost all commercially available seems to be from female cows or for higher fat content, I think that when it comes to improving your health and optimizing, your experience of life, ideally you want to, live in a fucking nature reserve and eat nothing but, grass-fed meat and get heaps of sunshine and drink water from the spring, and that's ideal. But when it comes to the things like concerns of hormones in the meat, we don't, and I've done my research on it and looked into it, the hormones present in meat are so low and so not bioavailable and have such a low impact on the receptor that I would not be concerned about that at all. How big of an impact does tap water or other exogenous estrogen have in terms of probable percentage importance? This is a great question. It depends on who you talk to. I think that the pesticide exposure, the plastics, the pollutions, the birth control traces in the tap water, and the bombardment with plastic all have an impact on things. I don't think that it's easy to go, oh, it's 40% this, 30% this, 20% that, 10% this. I think they're all contributing factors, but I think that drinking good quality water, so when you're out about getting glass bottled mineral water and having a good tap water filter at home, I think that's a very easy thing that's going to have a good ROI. But at the same time, if I'm at the airport and I'm dehydrated and there's only water in a plastic bottle, I'm drinking the plastic bottle of water because I'm thirsty. So it's important to have that balance, to not become neurotic and not let it develop into like a fear and anxiety thing, and go, what can I take control of? What action can I have? And I would not be concerned about eating commercially available meat at all. So someone's put a blood test panel. Some of this is not in English, but I can work out most of this. So the stuff that you're lacking on that blood panel, so Dixol, you're lacking T3 and T4, which are a measurement of your thyroid hormones. You should also measure DHEA. You should also measure vitamin D. And you should also measure cortisol. That's what's missing from your panel. That should be everything.
There's another one that's just come up. He's asking about how do you pronounce that? What
alkaline. So yeah, this is one thing that's firstly, I have not actually done a deep dive into this stuff, so I'm just speaking in terms of my initial impression, but it's marketed as a better, more bioavailable, less bloating form of creatine monohydrate. Again, I've been in the supplement industry for a long time, and they've always been trying to sell the better, more novel version of creatine. This one may be slightly better, but 5 grams of creatine monohydrate does the job just fine.
Is creatine bloating? I don't remember.
Creatine, yeah, so creatine will increase the amount of water being held in the muscle, which, I mean, bloat the muscle belly, but that's why it makes you look more swole. So I don't think that that's a bad thing. Creatine is one of the main nutrients you get from eating meat, particularly red meat. And it's something where, if you're eating a massive amount of red meat every day, I wouldn't bother with creatine supplementation. But if you've gone through a period of your life not eating much red meat, or you live in a country where, it's mainly, fish and pork and chicken, or you were a vegetarian or a vegan for a long time before you worked that out, it can definitely be worth adding in creatine because it's so cheap and it's so available and it's so well studied. And it also has far-reaching benefits on just about every system in the body. It's just very important that because creatine makes you hold more water, that you need to drink more water to keep hydrated when you're using it.
Right. Okay. But it doesn't cause, when you say bloating, does it cause belly bloating?
No.
It's more like the muscles are more swelled because of the...
Yeah. So it's not going to make you look puffy like if you've gone out and, drank a bunch of beers and ate some McDonald's. It's more going to make you look fuller and stronger, which is, if you're wanting to be really lean and shredded and step on stage for a bodybuilding show, that might not be quite what you're after. But for recreational, athletes and regular guys, creatine is an absolute game changer. I think Dr. Gabrielle Lyon has some great content on creatine. Tim Ferriss has some really good content on creatine. And I also think Derek from More Plates, More Dates actually has some great content on creatine as well. It's a very low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Anything else, guys? Mr. Tybolt's in there as well. Do you want to ask some question about how to bang for 12 hours a night or something? Tybolt is like,
I already...
President he already knows how to bang 12 hours a night.
The answer, but thanks, Dave, because all of the info that you shared, actually, they go very much with what I do. And do you feel that most of the men that comes to you, they actually have one of their main issues? It's not testosterone in terms of health, but in terms of sexuality. Like they have performance anxiety, they suffer from erectile dysfunction. And the question is that, do you feel that men that comes to you, that they come more for a general health perspective or sexual performances?
That's a good question. I think the sexual stuff is generally the symptom that guys can be like, hey, this is a problem. This is going to be the catalyst that makes me look into this and do something about it. But in terms of overall, when guys are having testosterone-induced sexual dysfunction, because you can have performance anxiety with all the testosterone in the world, trust me. It's definitely not a bulletproof vest for confidence. But generally, if a guy's got low testosterone-induced erectile dysfunction, he's also got a whole bunch of other issues in his life that are pretty meh. And by the time someone's come to me, they've generally put all those things together and gone, okay, all this stuff is a 4 out of 10. And that is something that a lot of guys are dealing with, is they're not at a 1 out of 10. Like they can get out of bed in the morning, they can soldier through, absolutely. But it's that they're not thriving. And I think a lot of the time that lack of thriving, it's hard. You can cover it up and mask it and, drink some coffee and compensate for it in other ways. But in the bedroom, that's very, very raw and unfiltered. And that's where you're really going to work out if you've got a problem.
I've got another question, actually, which is a sort of maybe a slightly more wrapping up type thing. But we've been banging the drum a lot this year particularly for testosterone. Like, hey guys, get your blood checked. If you're low T, you're not going to be performing as well. Not just sexually, but like in the dating marketplace, etc., etc. But having said that, there's still an extra piece to it, isn't it? Because it's not like every super high T guy is a complete slayer with women, right? You've still got to, and this is why we also, working with Bonaparte, or Tybolt, the sex coach here, as well, because it's like high testosterone is going to help in terms of giving you the drive, but you've also got to have the right mentality, haven't you? And that's not necessary. Maybe it's like what you said about exercise as well. It's not like you can just take some testosterone. It's like, right, I'm going to become Daniel Craig in 3 months. I'm just going to sit here. You've got to meet it halfway, maybe in terms of the mindsets about how to deal with women and how to deal with the dating marketplace as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm really stoked that you guys are seeing this stuff, because it's a fantastic message to be pushing out for people to understand the interplay between the biology and the psychology.
Yeah.
And again, if people want to dive deep into this, I've literally got hours of content on this. But it's if we use the example of the car, if we've got a guy who keeps crashing his car, I can fix the car, you can teach him how to drive. And that's different. And fixing the car might make him a slightly better driver. I mean, if you fix the issue with the car, but it's not going to make him a Formula One driver. But the way that I would look at it is that you're better off fixing the car first before you get the driving lessons, because it's going to make the driving lessons work way better. And the car is actually going to drive and respond the way that it theoretically should. Because if you're like, hey, you know, do this, take the corner like this, and they're like, well, I keep spinning out when I do that, then if they think, oh, well, that's because of my lack of skill and I'm driving wrong, that can be very demoralizing, because people are just going to give up. So I think that it's absolutely imperative that, particularly if guys have had low testosterone during their formative years and they don't have, like, I meet guys who are like, you know, 40, 45, and they had a testicular injury 8 weeks ago, and they're just like, yeah, I just need to get the buzz back. And they're like, cool, I'm back to normal. But when a guy's 30 and it's like, well, testosterone is going to make you feel like when you were 20 again, and he's like, but I felt like shit when I was 20. Yeah. Then that's going to be a much more long-term metamorphosis. I call it puberty part 2. And one of the most important things of development as a man is having a male role model or a mentor. And I think that that's fantastic in terms of what you guys are doing, is that you are literally mentoring men on how to interact socially with something that's very important to them. And it's also something that doesn't come naturally. Well, it does to some guys, but not to others. And it's not something that people are properly getting taught these days. But it's also understanding and going, the lessons and stuff that you teach and how people are actually going to respond when they experientially learn and put the techniques that you guys talk about into practice, it's going to work way better if the testosterone levels are higher. Just like if you're, you know, if you take the car for a spin, it feels much better to drive a Lambo than a car that needs a service. So absolutely, it's this meeting at halfway, and it takes time to undo. Like when I had, so my background was a brain injury. Like I had debilitating vertigo. Everything was spinning for like 2 years. So imagine if you span around in your chair 50 times, that was me for 2 years. I thought that when the dizziness went away, all the psychological anxiety and stress I had would go away and I'd go back to normal. Nope. I was just anxious and fucked from it because it was traumatic. And that didn't heal and resolve until I actually spoke through someone with it and really understood and, you know, kind of integrated what happened. So it's very important for guys to understand that if you've got poor mental health from low testosterone, that testosterone will give you the foundation to fix that mental health, but it won't fix it for you. And having someone guide and support you through that process that's the biohack. Like that's what people need. Like a lot of the time people are like, I need a steroid cycle. I'm like, no, you need a fucking personal trainer. And when it comes to mental health, it's like, oh, I need this supplement, this supplement, this supplement. I need to take, you know, 15 different cortisol lowering supplements so I can go to talk to girls. It's like, actually, maybe you need to not take anything and have someone actually coach you through this in a raw experience of it.
I think,
Otherwise, you're just going to go through life with your fucking training wheels on.
Yeah, it's definitely a holistic thing, isn't it? You know, and I think that's what we're realizing more and more. It's definitely, but this is a very, very big part of it, I think, because, you know, like, well, me and Jones have both experienced, you know, periods of like not having very high drive with this stuff, not really being that asked about it, and if you're coming from that baseline, how are you ever going to get any good at it? You know,
completely, and it's very much when we talk about, you know, intersexual dynamics and behavioral psychology, this is the stuff that works with the subconscious. This is the stuff that works in terms of underlying stuff. And I think that, it's a fantastic kind of marriage of these two concepts in terms of guys are like, well, this is where I'm at and this is where I want to get to. And it's understanding that, okay, it's not just one intervention that needs to be made. It's probably 2 or 3 or everything holistically. It's the synergy of doing them together. That's the thing I like, is the synergy.
Troy, Dave, just if I may, a quick one. Very interesting when you say a lot of men, they lack the father figure. They don't learn about masculinity when they're young. Are you aware of studies about the level of testosterone compared to fatherless men? Like men who didn't grow up with a strong masculine figure, does it have an impact on your testosterone level?
I would love if that would ever be studied, but no one's ever going to fund that study. We do know, and you know, I know that there's heaps of podcasts that talk about the outcomes of growing up without a father versus growing up without a mother, and how detrimental it is, you know, lacking a father figure for both men and women. The thing that's interesting about this stuff is we're kind of getting into like the nature versus nurture stuff in terms of how much of this stuff is impacted by circumstances and psychology versus how much is impacted by the biology. And that's why I like the Cars movie analogy so much, is that you're a car that's alive. So it's both. I think that lacking a father figure would lead to lacking the behaviors and activities and lessons and processes that are important for a rite of passage. And I think that the downstream effect of that is important, because a lot of the time when we're looking at studies, we're looking at a hyper-controlled environment, changing one variable and measuring the outcome via a very set specific measure of standards. And this is where people talk about, being like, oh, cold showers don't do anything, ice baths don't do very much. I'm like, bitch, if you wake up every day and get into a 1 minute freezing cold shower or cold plunge, yeah, there might not be some fucking, this acute spike in this biomarker, but the discipline and the choice to overcome hardship and the choice to do something hard for the sake of doing something, that translates into so much other stuff from a more holistic perspective. So I think all of this stuff has big downstream consequences, like absolutely. And one of the most important things that men can have is a male role model. And ideally, this is what I did when I was going through my shit. I had the people who I looked up to, like the people on YouTube who embodied a lot of traits that I wanted. And then I also had someone in real life, someone who I talked with and interacted with, who actually held me accountable, and someone whose respect I wanted to earn. So I had like a martial arts coach. And then, back when I was first kind of getting into the stuff, I was massively looking up to people like Andrew Tristan Tate. I was massively looking up to people like David Goggins, Jocko Willink, Wes Watson. These guys have got fantastic messages and content. And I think that having like a guiding star for something like that, but also someone who you're actually accountable to, whose approval that you want, not in like a weird way, but in a way being like, I want to earn this guy's respect because this is meaningful. I think that that's very important. And like, I didn't have a strong father figure growing up. And I and this is quoting Wes, his solution was be the man you needed when you needed him and be that guy for other people. That's what I've been doing since. And I think that, growing up without a father figure sucks, and not having that sucks. But if you understand that that's what you're lacking, you can also understand that that can be solved. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, James, have you got any further points to add, do you think?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just jump on the end of that. Dave, have you ever seen Wes Watson not screaming at the camera? Do you think he's capable of not shouting like at the top of his lungs, or is that just his shtick?
Well, they all do, don't they, really? I mean, the taste.
No, but Wes Watson particularly, he's a scary motherfucker. Like, his arms are bigger than most people's torsos, and he just sits there growling at the camera. He's like an ex-convict, and he's kind of self-made man and all this stuff. He's really inspirational in a particular way, but a scary motherfucker. But actually, just harping back to I think the first time we spoke, Dave, I think it was on a private call when I first decided to work with you, but you were talking about it was in your Silverback Summit lecture, which we'll share the link to for everyone to watch. You were talking about, and what really resonated with me, because it's what me and Troy and Mr. Tebow and Les and people like that talk about a lot, but which is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, constantly forcing yourself on a micro and a macro level out of your comfort zone into anxiety, and taking on challenging things in life, right? And learning. And I remember you saying every man should learn to fight. Every man should be looking at their mental health as well. So it was super interesting, because you'd never watched any of the content I put out, maybe a bit of Troy, but a lot of the stuff we were talking about was similar. So what are some things on that level, like as a holistic approach for life? Do you think that's a good way men should live? Always looking to force themselves into that anxious thing. And on top of that, apart from fighting, are there any other kind of keys to the kingdom you recommend from a holistic perspective on self-development?
Yeah, and these to me are the most important conversations to have, because TRT is not rocket science. I mean, it's a process of titrating dose and then following the right processes. But this stuff is the important stuff, because this is what subjectively impacts your experience of being alive, the human condition. And I think that the world that we live in at the moment offers so many amazing fucking creature comforts. And I think that people shouldn't shy away from that, in terms of like, I love my fucking iPhone. I love having Spotify and going for a walk with my AirPods. Like, I love all that stuff. I love having the creature comforts. I love my comfy fucking bed. I love all that shit. But it's also understanding that to enjoy the comforts of life, we also have to then relish the discomforts of life. And a lot of the time we have to create our own adversity to be able to simulate a more challenging environment, because adversity is great for toughening you up. But what people need to understand is that a lack of adversity is not going to keep you neutral. It's going to soften you over time, because we have very strong plasticity as humans. We are very moldable by our environments, the people that we surround ourselves with, our habits, our inputs, what we do, all these things. They say, you're the product of your 5 closest friends. You are what you eat, you are what you think, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's very important to understand the value of creating micro adversity on a regular basis, so that you can overcome the other things in life. One of the things that I think is very interesting with guys, and I speak to guys about this all the time, is they'll get anxious and overwhelmed and completely debilitated by just like paying their phone bill, keeping their room clean, and just like doing grocery shopping and working 40 hours a week. If that's the threshold of what you can handle, you need to understand that life is going to get much harder and it's not going to get any easier. So if you're finding that too difficult, you need to get harder. That's the solution, so that way everything else feels easier by comparison. If you play Halo on Legendary and then you get good at Halo on Legendary and you go back to normal, it's a fucking piece of cake. When Goku takes off his weighted clothing in I can't remember what, it's one of the first Dragon Ball Z fights. I can't remember who he's fighting. I think he's fighting Tien or Yamcha or something. But and Piccolo does it as well. Like the fight's fair, and then he takes off the weighted clothing, and it's like, oh fuck. That's the kind of thing. You have to find like your Halo on Legendary, or you have to find your weighted clothing. And for me, one thing was like I chose to move to the Baltics. I mean, I live in Lithuania because I like that it's challenging here. I like that it's hard. I like that it's isolating, because it makes me enjoy the creature comforts when I go back to the West so much more, but it's also very good for character building. So I think spending time in a country that is not so bubble wrapped and cushy is very valuable. I mean, I loved being in the States when like you walk, like everyone's so fucking nice and like everyone's so friendly. I had so many positive interactions all the time. But if it was like that all the time, it would definitely take away a lot of my resiliency. Absolutely. So I think that finding things in your environment that challenge you, and I think that there's a whole bunch of processes that you can do. I think things like cold showers and sauna are great. And the reason why they're great, and I think by extension, just steady state cardio is great. Cross trainer, go for a run. If you say, okay, I'm going to get on the elliptical for 60 minutes, you are going to try to talk yourself out of staying on there for 60 minutes a million fucking times. And I like doing 60 minutes of cardio for the sake of doing 60 minutes of cardio. It's just fucking horrible. I hate it. But it's the skill of not bitching out. And so things like that can be helpful. I think learning martial arts is extremely valuable, especially if you suck at martial arts. The most valuable martial arts lesson you'll do is the second one, because you didn't know what you were getting into the first time, so it doesn't count. But if you go back, if you're the worst person in a boxing or Muay Thai class and you go back, that's courage and bravery. And then you're also surrounding yourself with a bunch of people who are also choosing to do hard shit for the sake of doing hard shit. That's how you build a good community of people. So martial arts, heat and cold exposure, cardio. And then the other thing that I like doing, like one of the big defining factors for me, and I mean, I've posted about this on Instagram, I literally keep this medal with me everywhere I go, is that when I was doing rehab for my brain injury, I ran a Spartan race and they begged me not to run it. I came dead last by hours, but I still fucking finished that thing. And the advantage of doing like a Spartan race, which is like a truly difficult obstacle course, is that you have to train for something with dedication, and then you have to do something that pushes you beyond your comfort zone so that you can see what you're made of. And I think that if you regularly practice martial arts and cold and heat exposure, and you do physically challenging endeavors weekly, monthly, fortnightly, a couple of times a year, whatever, that staying on top of your emails, going up to the girl and asking for a number, that kind of stuff is going to seem way less stressful, because your body will actually produce less of a stress response. The coolest thing about martial arts is that you have to actually keep prevent yourself from flipping your lid and losing your shit while you're blocking combat. Like you have to be in a combat scenario and learn to keep your cool. So learning to keep your cool in situations that are challenging, surfing's a great one as well. I mean, getting dumped by waves is scary as shit. So finding things that force you to become more comfortable in the uncomfortable. And I know that it's a cliche that gets thrown around a lot, but it's extremely valuable, because you have to improve your resilience so that life becomes less stressful by comparison. And testosterone gives you the foundation to practice those resiliency processes and have them work properly, but it definitely doesn't do it for you.
I think it's a decision, isn't it, on a macro and a micro level. So setting yourself challenges, setting yourself new skill sets to take up that are going to force you out of your comfort zone, but also just on a micro level, like making those like in the moment, making those decisions. So don't eat the fucking donut, don't smoke the cigarette, take the fucking staircase, right? Those sort of micro things will build up over time, the compound effect. But I think it's so important you talk about that stuff, and that was one of the, not the key reason, but one of the big things that I really resonated with, in working with you initially, was that you actually brought that stuff in. Like you kind of, when I saw you, I was like, okay, this is the big Dr. Robotnik looking guy that talks about hormones, but actually it was way deeper than that. It was more about holistic lifestyle, and then TRT is just one piece of the puzzle. So super key stuff. Troy, any final thoughts, or Mr. T, any final thoughts?
No, I think that's probably very. I mean, it's been so comprehensive. I mean, we've gone through a load of stuff today, so I think that's probably. I think that's
big thank you, Dave. For those of you who don't know, he's a very, very busy man. He's very time shy. He's hard to get hold of. He's hard to get hold of than a Russian 10, a virginal Russian 10, in Dubai. So yeah, big thank you for all the value you've put out. Massively comprehensive today. And yeah, I hope the guys took a lot from this. And the procedure will be obviously just get in touch with myself or Troy. If you want to book an appointment with Dave, we'll send you all the bloods, and then we have access to his calendar so we can book you in. And I can't overstate, having done this stuff the bro science way as well, you know, where I kind of winged it and just took testosterone myself and then kind of came off it and then went back to Dave. Having someone to actually look at what you're doing who understands it is so key, especially because you're messing around with some very, very strong substances here. So I'm you know, just on a personal level, I'm supplementing with some TRT and some growth hormones, some thyroid stuff. But if I was winging that, I would potentially be in you know, that's potentially life-threatening stuff you're messing with. So you don't want to fucking wing this stuff. You want to go to someone like Dave, who is one of the world's leading dudes. And, you know, for the price that he's asking for, which is not by any means astronomical, it is well worth it. And I know Troy's going to say the same thing, but I feel better now than when I was 18. You know, in terms of getting the hormone dialed in. I've been working personally with Dave and paying him for about 5 months, and it's still a process. You know, some months to go till it's fully dialed in. But yeah, big thank you. And it's hard to really extol the benefits unless you're doing this with someone like Dave. But I mean, me and Troy both fly the flag for that, hence why he's here. And hopefully you'll be seeing more of him in due course. So yeah, big thank you, Dave. Any final words from you?
No, man, just thank you for your time, and thank you to everyone for your attention and watching. I think that it's, you know, I went and saw Jordan Peterson in Vilnius the other day, and
he was in Vilnius. What's he doing there? That's amazing.
That's the joke I made, and he sold out a fucking arena. And I made the joke that I didn't even think that many people spoke English in this country. And
monster.
It was amazing that literally an arena full of people in a tiny fucking Baltic country that barely even speaks, and he didn't have a translator. But all these people rocked up to work on themselves. They all rocked up to be like, I'm going to take time out of my day to hear a basically university lecture on getting your shit together. So I think it's really cool. And, you know, it's a testament to you guys and your community and everyone who's a part of this, is like, you're dedicating time and effort to actually having a better quality of life and experience, and understanding that there's work that needs to be done, and there's guidance in terms of the work that, you know, there's all kinds of crap out there that you can do, but I think it's important to have people who can guide you to go, look, this is the objectively right thing that's in your best interest. So, and I think what you guys are doing is fantastic in terms of, you guys, you're teaching people the skills that they need to be taught, and then they're experientially learning. I mean, men learn through experience. So
yeah, it seems to me, just as a sort of final thought, I mean, well, there's a couple of things. So the North Star, you've mentioned it already, but I think it's really interesting to say this isn't just about pulling chicks. This isn't just about getting jacked. This is more like, this could affect the whole trajectory of your life in a bigger way. So there's that. But secondly, as well, it's just really, I was saying to James, you know, it's such a big paradigm shift when you start looking at this stuff, because you realize, because there's so many different methods out there, isn't there? People you do meditation, you can do like fucking chakras, you can go and do hallucinogenic, you know, and stuff that I know you've probably, you know, maybe extolled as well, you know, like the hallucinogenic. So there's all these different sort of approaches to solving this problem out here. But it does seem to me that the hormonal thing, which doesn't get totally overlooked, but maybe slightly, people don't realize just how fucking key this is, really getting under the fucking bonnet of this stuff. You know, it's like, okay, maybe you've tried meditation, maybe you've tried journaling, maybe you've tried like fucking nofap for 7 months, you know, actually what's going to turn the dial, and it seems like the hormonal stuff is so integral as a basis for underneath all of this stuff.
Hugely, it's and that's what got me into it. I mean, when I was looking at psychiatry, I was like, hang on, this is not actually fixing the problem. A lot of these problems are coming from hormones. And when you look at what the hormones do, they do a lot of what we want the psychiatric drugs to do. This is just biohacking done properly. This is just targeted strategic biohacking. And to me, like, the best way I can summarize this is like, when you sort this shit out, you're basically giving yourself good genetics. Like, when you know that guy who's like, oh, he's just got good genetics, it's like, this is how you kind of have that effect in terms of like, it's not like a bulletproof vest for living like shit. It's not a cheat code to become Superman, but fuck, man, the quality of life that you can get and how it completely shifts where you are and where life will take you down the track is I mean, you guys are early days. I mean, I'm 7 years into this, and I just wish I could have done it sooner. And I mean, I'm saying that as someone who's not selling TRT. So it's yeah, it's great that these kind of spaces are converging and that you guys are you know, championing this. And I think it's really exciting because all I would want out of something like this is for one of these guys listening to go to the doctor and get a blood test and find out their testosterone was low and be able to fix it. Because that's what we need, is we need people to go, okay, I need to take control of this. I need to look into what's going on. And if that's going to be the thing that saves people's lives or gives people life that's worth holding on to, or life that's worth living, that's the most important thing. And especially if that can be done early.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. Great stuff. We'll share all of that, Dave's details below, all of his socials and all this stuff. And yeah, thanks again, Dave. It's been really informative. I know you've gone, yeah, we've had you for 2 hours, unbelievably. It's gone like a blink of an eye, but big thank you. And yeah, thanks for everyone for showing up. And we'll be posting this around the internets and everywhere.
Great.
Thank you for all your attention.
Many thanks, man. Fantastic.